As a kid, I always dreamed of buying a brand new Yamaha R1. I wanted to be the one to take it out of the crate. I wanted it to be flawless, brand spanking new, not a single scratch or a single mile on it. But instead, life happened, and I ended up with this Yamaha R1. I'm not complaining, it's still my dream bike, but it was a track bike before I got it. Nothing on it, from its suspension to its gearing to its fairings, are stock, and it's got quite a few war wounds to remember its past. And yet, I think I love it more than a brand new bike. Don't get me wrong, everything has its pros and cons, but it's changed my perspective on bikes. Let me explain.
It's really easy to make this bike look flawless on camera, but I've never hidden its troubled past. So let me show you the areas of the bike that bother me so you can get an idea of what I live with and why I consider it a bit thrashed or abused.
Most of what bothers me on a daily basis is the aesthetic stuff, because that's the stuff that you see every single day and get reminded about. The area with the most wear is actually the swing arm. It has a lot of scratches and worn areas, and you can see that it's been touched up in the past, but hasn't aged very well.
A track bike also goes through a lot more tire changes in its life than the average bike, so that naturally puts more wear on this area.
Fairings are also a big part of a superbike, and these are obviously aftermarket fairings because unfortunately I didn't get the originals with the bike. And although I absolutely love this color, nothing even comes close to the quality of OEM fairings. Overall, these fairings fit a lot better than I expected. The only unacceptable area is this airbox cover here that doesn't line up with the tank line at all. The biggest issue with the fairings, to be honest, is just the paint quality. I chose this fake carbon weave look, and I think they hydro dip that on and then clear coat over it.
But a lot of the sharp corners have red areas sticking through them. I have no idea why, but it looks terrible.
And unfortunately, when the guy who painted the wheels on my CBR saw my R1 the other day, he pointed out how the weave on these different panels isn't even consistent. This one sort of points this way, while that one points that way. And obviously, it's his job to notice these fine details, but since he pointed it out, I can't unsee it. I also got the tank and wheels repainted. And again, I love the color, I wouldn't change it, but the reason that I got them painted in the first place was because these parts had previously been resprayed and it wasn't done very well. So I wanted to fix that, but I suffered from the same problem.
Now, to be clear, this wasn't a cheap paint job. I didn't cheap out, and I went to one of the most respected shops in the country, which is why it's so disappointing.
To be fair, the wheels have fared very well, but the tank has been a problem since day one. When I installed this plastic airbox cover, I accidentally rubbed it against the tank, and it actually peeled the clear coat off of the corner of the tank here. Now, it is my fault for rubbing it against the tank in the first place, but in my opinion, plastic shouldn't be able to peel clear coat off of good paint.
And since then, more and more chips keep appearing just from general riding, where my arm rubs the tank, which is really disheartening.
But there are two ways a bike can be thrashed, right? Firstly, you can ride the wheels off of it, which is what it was designed to do. And secondly, they can be wear and tear due to neglect. So then there's the engine side of things. A motor obviously works harder on a racetrack, but that is what it was intended to do. Thankfully, it's never skipped a beat, but it is always in the back of my mind.
Since I'm complaining about it, it clearly bothers me. So why do I put up with it?
If this isn't what I want in a bike, there are plenty of bikes in the sea. Well, I hope not. But the point is that a few years ago, I wouldn't have even considered a bike like this. And now I'm actively seeking them out. Because the more abused bikes I buy, the more I enjoy having a bike with a weird history. It's also an 8-year-old bike already, so it's going to have some wear and tear. And this was a conscious decision, not an accident.
Since making videos is my job, the idea of having a project excited me way more than the idea of buying a flawless brand new bike.
Not that I could afford a brand new bike without financing it anyway. I'm not saying buying a brand new bike doesn't appeal to me or have its own perks either. getting any new bike is a rush, so I imagine taking delivery of a brand new one is even better.
I would love to be the one to get to run in a new bike. I'd love to have a bike with 0 scratches and to know its full history.
Every day I contemplate stripping my R1 down to the frame, getting everything repainted like the swing arm and the fairings, cleaning up parts and replacing parts as we go to make it absolutely showroom condition. But at the same time, I've also kind of enjoyed having a bike that I can worry about less.
6 years ago, my dad bought an anniversary edition R1 and it was 100% stock and pretty flawless.
And of course, he absolutely loved it and I absolutely envied it.
I kept bugging him to put an exhaust on it and he kept saying that it's so smooth and so perfect the way it is and that he's scared to ruin it.
At the time, he also had an MT-09 that he would commute to work on every day. So usually he'd only ride the R1 on Fridays and weekends. It sounds like the dream combination. And don't worry, it wasn't a garage queen by any means. He was happy to ride it and even did a handful of track days on it. But a few years later, he sold it. And I think the problem with owning a rather expensive and a bike that's close to perfect is that you're terrified to damage it in any way. Whether that means putting too many miles on it, riding it in the rain and scratching the paint, or even just riding it more increases the risk of crashing it. And yes, everyone enjoys bikes in a slightly different way, but that is not a problem that I have with my R1 as a result of its condition.
Because my bike is already pretty worn, riding it in the rain and getting it disgustingly dirty doesn't bother me as much.
And if I just hose it off because I'm in a rush or give it a bit of a lazy wash instead of a full spa day, I don't feel as bad because no matter how clean I get it, it still won't be perfect.
Obviously, I don't want to crash it, and I don't go out to intentionally abuse it, but I am slightly less scared of dropping it because it doesn't have gorgeous and expensive OEM fairings to begin with, and the paint is already chipped and flawed.
I ride the wheels off of this every chance I get. Well, my version of riding the wheels off of it, which is probably pretty slowly. But I'm never shy to ride this through traffic, even if it gets slightly hot. But I know that if it was flawless, I would baby it and ride it less. Not to mention, somebody else took the depreciation hit for me. So I can probably sell this for what I have in it.
I technically got upgrades for free too. The SC project, the quick shifter and the Batubo suspension were included in the price. And although I love it all, I would never have spent the extra money to get that stuff.
As far as I know, the valve issues that these silver engine R1s were plagued with has also been taken care of for me. And it was supposedly rebuilt 5,000 kilometers ago. So technically, I have nothing to worry about. But I've already done so much to this bike already that I'll take it as it comes.
Not to mention, I formed a bond and a connection with this bike because I've done so much work on it. And I was the one to customize it in the exact way I wanted to.
I'm not suggesting that everybody go out and buy thrashed second-hand bikes, and I still want to buy a brand new bike someday. But there was a time when I wouldn't have even considered a bike in this condition or with this history, even if it was my dream bike. But now I'm learning that I can have just as much fun on a bike with a bad past. Potentially even more fun because I get to wrench on it more, and potentially for less money, but that one is a huge gamble.
But anyway, let me know if you think your bike would be more fun with more wear and tear on it, as strange as that sounds, and I'll see you on the next ride.